I'm Mike, and I am the cloud practice lead for Excion Solutions.
How you doing? I'm Mason Chaudhry, I'm the CTO at Excion Solutions. Thanks for joining us today. We've got a rapid talk for you today, discussing a very critical issue in the tech world, and that is the shortage of tech talent. We're going to focus today on bridging the cloud skills gap. More and more organizations are going down the cloud path, and that is leading to a serious supply and demand issue. Be it cloud technology or others, most executives are telling everyone from Gartner to Forrester to anyone that will listen that the most significant barrier to adopting new transformation, new technology, new process is the inability to bring on the correct technologist, the right talent. And so in that, I come to you, Mike. You and I, we work with customers, we work in the trenches, we're working with the latest in technology, but you and I both are seeing a push in milestones, a delay in bringing on new applications into the cloud, a delay in adopting DevOps technology, and a lot of that is being attributed to organizations' inability to find the right tech talent to do so. So what's your opinion? How big is this skills gap in the cloud and automation and others?
Well, it really depends on specifically which technologies you're referring to as far as cloud is concerned. However, there is a sizable gap of technology knowledge in what the companies that are attempting to do in going the cloud, going multi-cloud, adopting automation technologies. There's a huge gap in what they have currently on their staff versus what they need to have on their staff in order to accomplish their goals. And the problem is that in these typical scenarios, you would go out and you would just hire more people. Well, what they're finding is that it's also there's just a complete lack of people in the marketplace that have the skills that they need in order to bring them in and work with the technology they need to use.
Mike, I read a study that since the pandemic started in 2020 into 2021, there's been a 50% jump of organizations moving applications into the cloud. So I get there's a shortage, but apparently there is an insatiable demand of organizations trying to get into the cloud. I mean, is the issue a lack of people, or is just the demand to get in the cloud driving everything up?
Well, it's a combination of two separate things. There's a huge demand for people, and the technology keeps changing. So if you blink, suddenly there's 3 new services that you didn't know about previously that are providing a feature that you didn't necessarily know that you had, but now that it's available, you're like, I have to have that. And so, it's just a matter of keeping up and finding the people who are up to date with all these skills.
So, but quick question. You've worked in public sector and you've worked in commercial. The leaders of the world, the Cap Ones, the Netflixes, the Spotifys, they jumped in early. Now, all of a sudden, you're seeing traditionally stodgy, laggard organizations determining that, you know what, it makes more sense to run their applications hosted by someone else rather than their own data centers. What is driving cloud adoption?
Well, one of the major drivers for the cloud adoption is just simply it's, overall lower TCO for everything. So you can put things in the cloud that you can then manage explicit costs everywhere on all of the things that you place there. So you don't no longer have to maintain a data center. You don't have to maintain the people who are actually capable of managing that data center. All of your infrastructure problems are basically handled by someone else. The only thing that you have to manage is the virtual side of all of that. The other one is that there's basically near infinite scalability for software applications. So you can go from a single server to thousands of servers in an almost instantaneous manner. And to do that in a classic data center is nigh on impossible without throwing millions of dollars of hardware.
Yeah, and what you're saying here is a good segue. So if you're sitting in a C-suite right now, you're a decision maker, and you're saying the benefits of the cloud a few years ago were theoretical. Oh, you save money, elasticity, resiliency. And you say, all right, maybe that's possible. You take in CapEx, OpEx considerations, but you forward to 2021, and the reality is TCO is lower with cloud. So now if you're sitting in the C-suite, you're saying, man, it makes total sense to get into the cloud, migrate my applications, do the lift and shift, re-provision or build brand new. But if you don't have the people, then you've got to figure out, all right, am I going to try to pay extra, look at the market, go down the consulting path, or am I going to stay where I'm at until the market stabilizes? What are your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, those are essentially your options, and one of the major benefits for not discontinuing your cloud efforts is that one of the biggest advantages to being in the cloud is that it allows you the ability to try things in a non-destructive manner. Meaning that if you want to experiment with some of the things that you're currently running, there's no easier place to do that than in the cloud. The cloud has been, labeled as basically a key enabler of excellence within organizations. Again, you can rapidly test something, you can rapidly tear down something, and just get in there. So I think that any organization that's looking at scaling back their cloud adoption or is looking at potentially, potentially just stopping where they are right now and waiting till the market changes, they're doing themselves a huge disservice because they can continue to work within the cloud. They can continue to expand within the cloud. And the more that you do that, the more that your on-hand staff is going to learn about your cloud implementations.
Yeah, I'm with you. So let's take a different tack. A lot of people who listen to technology, be it a podcast, a webinar, they hear a lot of canned stuff. Do this, do that, upskill, look at the market differently. But what we want to do today is look at some of the common tacks organizations take to address the cloud gap and talk about how real they are and what would actually work. And with that said, Mike, let's first talk about upskilling. Everyone's focused on upskilling, but a lot of time, it's not that it's lip service. A lot of times it's just an option on an organization's intranet. And with, I'm going to give you an example. Business Insider is stating that in a poll that they did, a survey of a lot of technologists, 7 out of 10 technologists were saying that they would puddle jump. They would leave their current job in the next year if they could, or if the offer was right. So if 70% of technologists are willing to jump ship, is offering upskilling or a class or two somewhere on your intranet going to cut it? And if not, then what do you recommend organizations do?
Well, I mean, and that's a huge problem. If you're looking at 70% of your staff potentially jumping ship, now you've got a completely different problem to deal with, which is how do I keep my people? And you're absolutely right. Just having something just sitting out on your intranet, that's not going to work. What I'm seeing is that especially on a survey that I just read from HashiCorp, they interviewed a whole ton of technologists, and what they saw from there is that the cloud center of excellences are actually growing within organizations. So right now, what we're looking at is roughly 40% of those people that were surveyed in that survey have a cloud center of excellence. That means that 60% of those organizations don't even have a center of excellence. So, those organizations that aren't catering to the people within their organizations by providing something like that, they are basically shooting themselves in the foot in that regard, because that is a key enabler of your internal employees to learn more about what's going on from a technology perspective. So and a center of excellence is not so much as you've got an intranet website with links to resources. No, this is, you take your people within your organization, you have training sessions with those people, you have follow along one-on-one sessions with those people, you have resources and available. You use your center of excellence to make sure that the people within your organization are have the contacts in the industry to actually get the information that they need so that they can learn more, they can provide more value to the organization as a whole.
Yeah. You know what? I'm gonna argue one further than you. I've seen so many companies say, hey, we are focused on educating our people and upskilling our people. But I ask you this, the listener, is your organization providing options, or is it evangelizing and pushing upskilling? Are you providing, is your organization providing company time to learn new skill sets? If automation is key in your organization, Are you providing company time to your teams to understand and learn what Red Hat tools or HashiCorp tools can do? And then beyond that, be it through consulting companies or internally, are you pushing some old notions such as paired programming that might help today, or taking a dojo approach? Mike, I really do believe that organizations that are looking to move from one mode to the other, why wouldn't they teach while they implement, while we're in such a shortage of labor? Do you agree or disagree?
I mean, it makes sense, teach while you're growing. And the problem is that like a lot of organizations that I've seen have what I would consider training that's available within their organization. That's just a line item in the organization's benefits. You can go, we'll reimburse you for training. But then as soon as you go to ask someone in the organization, hey, I'd like to take some time off to actually do this training, they're like, no, we need you to finish this first. And so training within a lot of organizations has become, a second, third class citizen to everything else that's going on inside an organization. And those organizations that are struggling to find those people who have the knowledge that they need to reevaluate that. They need to look at it and make training a first class citizen within the organization, be it centers of excellence, be it dojo training, be it, one-on-one pair programming sessions, you name it. Like they need to make training and skilling up of their employees a much higher priority than they currently do.
Agreed. And you mentioned center of excellence a few times, and I'm going to give you a hot take. Most organizations, I know you said 60% don't even have a COE, but if they do bring on a COE, and a lot of organizations that currently have one, a COE tends to be a couple of things. And I'm not saying everyone's like this, but it tends to be a portal with a bunch of documents and links to technologies. The reality is a true cloud COE can bring down your dependency on cloud resources. I mean, the math here is if you invest in a COE that has project management in it, what you're in essence telling your organization is, hey, cloud technologists, we're going to make your life easier. We're going to have a centralized repository of pre-built templates. We're going to have out-of-the-box services. We're going to have reconfigurable elements. We're going to have containers. So you know what? You can do your job with a lot less friction. And as an executive, I'm thinking to myself, I need a lot less resources because I provided them a shop. Are COEs actually being built like this, Mike, or is it just, hey, go find the documents that you need or an AWS cert you need in a COE?
Well, many COEs are put in place to check that hypothetical box where it says, hey, we have a COE. And it's unfortunate. They create a repository of documents and then they just leave it there. They don't really actually do anything to help it grow. They do not, because basically, your center of excellence is a lot like a plant. If you don't feed it, if you don't water it, then it ends up dying. And a dead plant doesn't do anybody any good. So, do those things, provide repositories that have example codes, have templated code, have things that, your employees can experiment with, have, basically provide them with the tools and opportunities to allow them to improve themselves.
Yeah, and so I'm going to take that one further. We talk about repeatable process and repeatable tools. I know this is about bridging the cloud gap, the labor gap, but the reality is if you reduce the amount of steps required to operate your cloud offering, you need less people. So this is a way of tackling your talent shortage. So in that, Mike, let's get granular for a minute. There are opportunities to create templates. There's opportunities to become agnostic in your tooling, so you don't need a tool SME for every tool that you use. Let's talk about that. What are some tips that people can take in order to say, hey, is my organization, or not tips, maybe even questions, is my organization really focused on creating repeatable, not just repeatable process, but repeatable tools that can be leveraged across the enterprise?
Well, I mean, one of the biggest questions that you can ask within an organization is, how many things do I have to do manually? And then of those things that I have to do manually, how many of those do I do repeatedly? And if the answer is more than a few, then your organization needs more automation. It's just hands down, you need to provide more automation for the people who are doing repeatable tasks and are doing them manually. Now, one of the things that you can, one of the things that you can do is you can also evaluate the automations that you're currently using. And when you evaluate those automations, you can actually look at them and make them better automations. So, for example, an automation that works is an automation that hits an API and creates something, let's say a token, based on another system saying, hey, I need a token. Now, what happens if you request 30 tokens? Well, that automation could request 30 tokens from the API, one at a time. And that totally works. Is it efficient? Not even remotely. However, it still works. So just because your automation is working doesn't necessarily mean that your automation is the most efficient that it can be. So analyzing your existing automations is also a really great step to ensure that the automations aren't creating additional work for your workforce. You also need to make sure that everyone who's working within the automation tools, they have an understanding as to what the automation tools are doing. Because automations are basically useless to people when they break if they don't understand how the automation works. Yeah. If there's a single point of failure within your organization on your automation, that's a problem. You need to identify those single points of failures. Otherwise, automation can fail. And when it does, if that one person is out, guess what? You're stuck.
Okay, but I would argue something. I think I see things a bit differently. And let me tell you what I mean by that. In my opinion, I've spoken to and worked with executives that every day ponder their technical debt and their IT spend. And they say, all right, am I going to first get into the cloud and then worry about automating, or am I going to put all the tooling up front? My hot take is, if you spend the money in the front end, create the automated network, reduce the workload on your current resources, reduce your future needs for resourcing in the cloud, you will save in the long term. And a lot of executives say, well, I do not have the talent in the building. And I know it's not popular to leverage consulting, but the reality is, if you are weighing setting yourself up for success now while building your team, teaching your team, the cost benefit analysis will indicate, and a lot of this can be backed up or research done by Gartner, Forrester, and others, that spending up front on your automation will lead to cost savings overall. And while we're in a really skinny labor market, I think now is the time to do that. So Mike, I think maybe that's my difference. I know you're saying automation can go to waste if you don't have the right people, but you've got to first get that automation in place.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't completely disagree with that. But I think that I think that you need to make sure that you're automating the right things. So just evaluating what your focus is with your automation can go a long way to making sure that you're automating the right things for your organization. And every organization's needs are different in that regard. So it's up to you as an organization to determine exactly what it is that you need to automate and what should be the priority there.
And that's fair. So I know we're running up on time, and these are the questions I'd love for our listeners to ponder as we close out this conversation. Please ask yourself or your organization if you guys are really empowering your teams to upskill internally. Are you really evangelizing that? Are you leveraging a dojo method? Do you ask your own teams or your consultants to teach while they implement? Is your COE a paper COE, like a paper tiger, or are you actually creating repeatable processes that brings down your costs and your burden? Do you actually have the right tooling that makes things easy in your organization? Are your tools agnostic? And if you're making decisions on automation and spend, are you looking at the big picture, looking at the spend early on, and looking at your cost savings towards the end? So as you ponder those, I appreciate you joining Mike and I, and we look forward to talking to you again and sharing our hot takes. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Mason.
I've got my information here towards the end. If you've got questions or if you disagree or agree with us, we'd love to hear from you. I know the topic we've described today is a hot topic in small, large, commercial, public sector enterprises. If you found a way or a rationale around bridging this gap, we'd love to hear from you. Have a good day.